Good afternoon. We will call the special work session to discuss the City Hall on August 5th, 2020 to order. Because we are using the Zoom platform today, I need to read a quick disclosure. To ensure public safety and comply with the Governor's Safer at Home order and response technologies such as telephonic or video conferencing, as provided by Section 120.545B2, Florida statutes. The meeting will be held through the Zoom platform and will be broadcast live on the city's website at https://www.myclearwater.com/government/council-meeting-streaming-videos. On Facebook at www.facebook.com/City of Clearwater. And on YouTube, www.youtube.com/myclearwater, as well as the following public access TV channels: Spectrum Channel 638, Frontier Channel 30, and WOW Channel 15. Individuals with disabilities who need reasonable accommodations to effectively participate in this meeting are asked to contact the city clerk at 727-562-4092 or at rosemary.call@myclearwater.com in advance. So with that, we have a city manager verbal report, and we'll let Mr. Horn start off the conversation. I'm sure everybody has their packets.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This workshop or special meeting today is a continuation of our discussion about City Hall and the library. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Delk, who has prepared a short presentation to get us into focus on the kinds of things that we'd like to discuss with
you. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Michael Delk, Assistant City Manager. I want to make a couple of points here before we start off on, as Bill, what Bill indicated, is a relatively short presentation. What I'm trying to do is to try to simplify, make this a easier conversation. Sometimes it's kind of hard to make things easy in terms of the discussion, but we're gonna try. What I wanted to do is to give you some point of reference, structure on point of reference for how we can kind of frame our discussion. It is not my intent to be prescriptive or make a specific recommendation to you. Certainly in this case, a lot of times I certainly have a tendency to do that. I'm not shy about my my professional recommendations to you, but that's really not the point today. We have been through a number of processes here, and with the prior council, some priorities in terms of how our internal committee evaluated the sites. And then with the change in council, I think it's understandable, and is often the case, sometimes those priorities change. But we do have some urgent points that are up on us in terms of decision making and our need to move forward with the park redevelopment project. So we want to try to do what we can do today to help facilitate you in making a determination as to what direction you want us to go. Now, I've attached here, and you all have a copy of my short PowerPoint today that I'm going to go through, but I also attached to that what has previously been provided to you from Director Clayton on the work of the committee in the background. So that is reference. I'm not going to go through that again, but if any of your questions or issues take us back to that study, we'll have that there for you. And I know Gina and the committee, the group are available to help answer any questions about that. So let me kind of walk through this framework here. Decision timing impacts. I think we're obviously at a critical juncture, as you're well aware, with regard to the park. Our gross maximum price for the work for Duke Infrastructure is coming up on September 3rd. On September 17th, the second gross maximum price for the library entry renovations is to be commenced with a 9-month construction from 10/1 to July of 2021. So we're quickly moving into the construction phase. And so right now, the most immediate concern is what our contractor is charged with doing for the library. So if we're going to contemplate moving the city hall into the library, we need to determine that sooner rather than later. If our decision is that we do not do that, then our next really timing impact is no longer associated or tied to the library and the park redevelopment, but rather the decision-making with regard to our lease here at 600 Cleveland, and then how we proceed around a new City Hall facility, keeping in mind that we've got that outstanding lease that we'll have to either move out when it's over, or negotiate an extension, or sign up for an additional 5-year, which we already have the right to take advantage of. So we've already negotiated a 5-year extension. If we want something less than that, then we'll be back to renegotiating. So just some thoughts to keep in mind. Again, the use of the library is of immediate consequence due to the design and construction timing, which is certainly well underway, getting very close to proceed. We have to determine how we intend to proceed with those improvements. If the library ends up not being the site for City Hall, the pursuit of alternatives will factor into the future lease status at 600 Cleveland. So I guess our first question is that, do we look to the library as a City Hall option or not? There are some pros and cons for that. Again, this is not a complete or exhaustive list. These are my attempts at helping you really think about how you want to take a look at this and how we can collectively prioritize. So this is not a complete list, or there may be some things on here you agree with or don't agree with. And we've given you hard copies so that you can refer to that through our meeting and add or delete anything from that you want to. But some of the things that would be advantage potentially that I thought of that for the library is the cost of construction. It's probably one of our easiest or least expensive costs of entry into a new City Hall. Is the renovation of the library joint use facility. So there's timing benefits to that. We already have portions of the facility design underway. The City Hall Library Park redevelopment project becomes a City Hall Library / park. So really 3 projects become 2. The library stays put. Opportunity zone opportunities, and what I'm thinking of there is really related to some of the infrastructure. Maybe parking is an example, that if we have a development partnership with somebody on the Harborview site coming up, then that may be an opportunity for us to partner with them on some additional parking and so on to support either library and park. It would increase the civic focus of the Bluff. I mean, housing City Hall there along with the library really retains that civic orientation to the Bluff and the waterfront. It could possibly have a benefit to the expansion possibilities at the MSB in terms of the Development Service Center. And the reason I mention that is that we've considered in the past, discussed that it might be an option to pull in an additional department or 2 into the City Hall group that would move into the library. If that's the case, then it may free up space in the MSB to take a look. For example, if we ever want to bring back the Development Service Center function, it allows maybe more latitude and the flexibility of use of that building. Depending upon your perspective, PSTA in the City Hall would not be an integrated facility. And again, that's based on your individual perspectives. And I just reiterate again, this may be the quickest option in terms of settling what we want to do with City Hall. Although there are some caveats to that, and I'll talk about those in a moment. By the same token, there are some disadvantages. Short-term delay on finishing up the park library construction design process. There is some cost to redesign. The parking or lack thereof could be considered an issue, so that's something that we would have to plan to address over the next couple of years. Impacts on the library and programming is certainly a factor. The potential lack of support from library stakeholders and citizens, there could be some concerns out there with regard to that. And I would put what was a pro, on the other hand, could be a negative on the as well, by virtue of the increase of civic focus of the bluff. I think, you know, between the amphitheater, the music venue, and the library, and possibly a city hall, clearly the north third of our park and waterfront property are you know, devoted to civic kind of uses. So, you know, we've expressed some concerns in the past about the extent of non or civic components to the downtown market. You could be considered a negative that PSTA and City Hall are not integrated, depending upon what your priorities are. And you could also make the case that that it may lack the iconic virtue of a civic complex and identity that might follow along with that. Some of the reasons that you might choose to do something other than the library, for example, might be that a standalone municipal complex is a more prominent consideration in terms of what the public is looking for, what we want to establish as public place for our municipal complex. The impact on the library programming is found to be too great, that there is potentially some symbiotic relationship between the existing municipal functions, the MSB and the police department, and that City Hall should be a component of that civic space as a public or municipal complex. Could be that we desire to ultimately have a more highly integrated municipal complex with the PSTA and a multimodal development options in the future. Of course, we're always subject to what the pending PSTA direction would be on that, would be beyond our control ostensibly. We might prefer more emphasis on civic architecture or statement as a public facility. We may determine that cost is in fact less important than what we may think it is at this point. Timing may be less important. So I think, you know, if we look at a separate facility, there could be some additional cost to that, and certainly an impact on timing just for the City Hall. That takes us kind of back to our need to deal at some point with our lease extension or renegotiation here at 600 Cleveland. And also redevelopment may be promoted with adaptive reuse of the property down along the bluff or some of the other areas, and an expanded civic presence around our municipal facilities. So I would say that if, you know, if we need to spend more time with the City Hall location analysis and we want to get deeper into the alternatives, then I think that's the most immediate concern that I would have, is that our library and park redevelopment project can proceed as it's currently envisioned, and we'll get started off down that road, which we're already on. For any option other than the library, I think we can, you know, we think there's a strong possibility the lease with 600 Cleveland is likely to be impacted, and Mr. Maxwell can, you know, we can talk a little bit more about that later on if we need to. If the library is chosen, the operational impact, I would point out, will not be known until a preliminary design occurs. The city engineer has indicated that that could be anywhere from 4 to 6 months. I mentioned 6 months here as kind of an outside date, worst case scenario. And if the library ultimately is not chosen, then certainly, you know, our decisions on other sites and the design associated therewith will have been delayed somewhat. And the last thing that I would like for us to cover is, I'd like to be clear before we walk away from here today, and that is, what is your expectation for process moving forward in order to finalize these and the matters related to the City Hall and the completion of the park redevelopment? And I think about that in terms of I'm not anticipating that we need to hire additional consultants. We seem to be comfortable in making a lot of these decisions on our own. I think that, whether or not we have extensive public meetings and that sort of thing, how we approach that from taking it to the community in terms of charrettes or other things, the planning for that. I'm not proposing any of that. We're going to follow your direction in terms of what you want to see us do in order to help get you to a decision. So I will end there. I think that is the last slide. I offer these things again as some general kind of guidance, some starting talking points for you to amend or reprioritize as you see fit. And with that, Mayor, I will turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Delk. I appreciate some of the questions that you're posing, because I think going through this decision tree will actually help the council narrow, what their vision is for the future. And I think we need to do that. I loved receiving all of the decision points that have occurred over the years with the history of City Hall's replacement. Having lived through a lot of those, I think the newer council members can see how often that can has been kicked down the road. Oftentimes because the priority just wasn't City Hall. Something else bubbled up that was more important to the leadership that we pay for. And so that was one of the cupboards that was always raided in Penny for Pinellas to pay for something else. And I see Mr. Horn chuckling at that, because, you look at it on a couple of these pages, but it was more painful than that over the years. So I'd like to start with some of the questions that Mr. Delk and that are in the agenda item. They're some of the ones that I put together myself with a couple additionals. But if we could just have a discussion, and I also want to hear from Ms. Clayton and go on to some of the other issues. But I think the first is, how important is visibility, accessibility, and architecture of City Hall? And I'm actually going to just kick that off. To me, I know there's been the desire from some to make City Hall, the central hub of the city. And that, I think, goes hand in hand more with iconic architecture. And I think my traditional side, which many of you know, we own a 95-year-old house. I love tradition. I love history. I love historic buildings. At the same time, I don't know that city halls are what they used to be. Kind of the way we thought about them. To me, I really look at city buildings, especially the ones dealing more with government. I want a good place for our employees to work, a safe place, a functional place, but I don't necessarily feel like it needs to be an iconic location with iconic architecture. And normally what goes along with that is significant cost. Most of the people who come to the MSB are coming for a permit of some sort. If they come to City Hall, at least in our former iteration, they were generally coming to meet with one of the departments or to come to a city council meeting and interact with the city council. And oftentimes it was because they either supported something or they opposed it. But other than that, most people didn't come to City Hall. In fact, some people didn't even know where City Hall was, even though it was built in the 60s. They only found out when they came to a point that they really needed to interact with their city officials. for that reason, I don't feel like we need to have, I mean, like Philadelphia has a very iconic city hall. It's in the center of the city. It's an architectural gem. I don't think we're going to build something like that because of cost. So to me, that isn't as important. I want something that's functional and affordable. And I don't necessarily think City Hall needs to be standalone, but I also don't believe that we need to replace a 23-year-old building in our MSB, which I know many people believe was not a great design from the beginning and actually has some things that need to be fixed. But if we repurpose it and sell it to the private sector, we're never going to get anything remotely close to what it's going to cost to replace. And so to me, it is a standalone city hall in some location that we're trying to replace. I mean, that's because I don't want to do a $65 million combination of MSB and City Hall. I think that would be wasteful on our part. And unless we had a public-private partnership that utilized some of our land and did, you know, real multi-use where we had a city hall complex, an MSB, possibly office, and even residential. And that has been done in some cities. And the development opportunities helped pay for the municipal side of the equation. But that's just my perspective on iconic buildings, accessibility and visibility. I'd love to hear from the rest of you. Councilmember Bunker.
I tend to agree with you on most of your points. I don't believe we need an iconic building, and it would be hard to come up with something that would be more iconic than Scientology's Fort Harrison Hotel and their flag building. I think those are the iconic buildings that people think of when they think of downtown now. I do think the library is a beautiful location. I'd hate to see the library be constricted and not be able to function as properly, but it makes most sense financially. And just in the friendly nature of coexisting in the library, it makes it easier for people if they want to come to a council meeting. Well, it's at the main library right downtown. City Hall's in the library. I think that's much easier to communicate to people who are already comfortable coming to a library, so they'd be more comfortable coming to see us at City Hall.
Thank you, Councilmember Bunker. Councilmember Hamilton.
Well, I don't know that if we're jumping ahead of the gun here, if we want Gina to do her presentation, but I've made my, I've let it be known that I think the library is a great location for a city hall. However, I have serious doubts that the library can house City Hall and all of the library needs and library things come together, because I look at that building in that location as something that needs to be activated and be absolutely integral with Imagine Clearwater and what's going on down in the park, which means to me, the first floor gets blown up and has lots of public services such as a snack bar, a cafe, information booth, whatever. It could have an art exhibit area that could change out monthly for different types of art exhibits, but it needs to be totally active and integrated with the park itself. Now, that being said, now you take everything in the library and try to incorporate what we need for City Hall and put it on second, third, and fourth floor. there's not enough room for all that. I don't think there's enough room in that building to do all that. If someone can show me that it is big enough to do that, because you'd have to, you got to build a new council chamber on one of the floors. You've got to build, all the office spaces out and everything else. So I just don't know that the building itself can coexist as City Hall and the library. And I also think, if we're going to activate that first floor the way I think it should be activated, a City Hall is much more conducive than a library because of the activity and the noise and everything else. So I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody else has to say. But I guess the other point I want to make is, as we've gone through this and I've gone through the thought process on this, there's absolutely, and I agree with you, Mayor, there's absolutely no reason to spend the money to have one consolidated building that houses everything the city, all of the city offices. Because if there's one thing we've learned during this pandemic, we have the ability to meet via Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and everything else. So we don't have to all be in the same building to function and be effective. So.
Vice Mayor? You're muted.
I've given us some thought. I hadn't occurred to me to use the library for City Hall, but I've heard you with your ideas and Hoyt's ideas over the past month or so, and I've thought about it. I kind of agree with Mr. Hamilton. If we do something in the library with City Hall, it's going to displace some of which I think are very great floors in the library that have a lot of history and things that are available for the public, like the fourth floor. The library as such, it's more than just a repository for books. It's a very active place. So I keep thinking back on the whole Imagine Clearwater active, Bluff Walk active edge that we're trying to create. I don't think of City Hall as being part of an active edge. As you stated, Mr. Mayor, people go to City Hall for meetings, basically, or a meeting with us in an office setting. It's not an active thing that if you're going to the park, you're going to stop by City Hall. You're going to maybe stop by the library and do some things, and especially if we're doing some mixed use in the library. I hope we have some art on the first floor and maybe a Starbucks or a restaurant or something that will be used by people. I just don't see City Hall as being part of that active edge. And if we're thinking about doing a library and City Hall, first of all, we got the build out costs. And then I know we're going to have to put an elevator in there on the outside to get to City Hall, because the library will probably be closed when we have meetings. So there is additional cost that is going to be affiliated with that. And then the other thing is parking. I mean, we can always say, depending on what is being built next door, that they give us some parking, but I've got a alternate plan that I'll discuss later, but as far as using the library for City Hall, I think that's going to be an expense, and then we're going to end up having to put whatever we take out of the library somewhere else. So we got to include that too.
Councilmember Beckman?
I agree with most of what's said. I don't think the library should be used as as City Hall. I think it needs to remain totally for the public, the view. Parking isn't adequate for City Hall. I think it should be optimized 7 days a week for residents to use to come and go, not just like a 9 to 5 work. I don't want the library part compromised, and I don't want the City Hall part compromise. So I won't go into a whole bunch, but yeah, I would not be in favor of having City Hall become part of that library down there, our main library.
Okay. Well, I'm hearing mixed views. It's interesting. I think we always think of the library, because this isn't a new topic, by the way, of it being split horizontally. But Rick Ortega, who used to be one of an active member in the community who's passed sadly, has always said that a lot of people thought of it incorrectly and it would be better to split it vertically. And I don't think we've ever looked at it from that standpoint. I mean, I do not have my heart set on anything. What I do have my heart set on is not spending too much money and also not being closed-minded to additional ideas. I was talking to the city attorney. You know, right now we have our city hall offices on one floor of the 600 building. And it's about 13,000 square feet per floor. And one of the things I asked her about was, have we ever thought of going into potentially a condominium arrangement? Because the 5th floor on this building is also vacant, and it's a shell. And I don't know that the Bank of America is going to stay here. It's been closed now down since COVID. They've never used the drive-throughs in many years. There is a chance that, you know, we could put a city hall in a building like this permanently and have the chambers on the 1st floor where the Bank of America offices are. I just hope we will, and I'm not saying that that's the answer. This is an older building. It's 45 years old, which Miss Aiken's shaking her head. It frightens her. But you know, I think we ought to have an open mind on different locations. I guess, let me ask this question. Is there support for building a combined city hall and new MSB? I heard no from Council Member Bunker. We're not taking votes, but I'm trying to get an idea of the direction so that we can at least narrow the field. I am not in favor of replacing the MSB. Vice Mayor?
Yes, I considered it, but after talking to city manager and considering all the ramifications of displacement, I'm not for that either.
Councilmember Hamilton, I saw you shaking your head.
I said I have no, you know, we do not need to consolidate into one large building. A, because of price, and B, it's just not necessary.
Councilmember Beckman?
I would agree with Councilmember Hamilton. I mean, it's not necessary. In a perfect world with an unlimited budget, I think it would be fantastic. But I think right now when we're watching pennies and there's so much unknown, I would not be in favor of combining them.
Okay, so I think we have consensus on that it would be a new city hall in some location. I'm not hearing overwhelming support for the library. So the Library Foundation is doing somersaults. Councilmember Hamilton?
Yeah, I guess my other question though now becomes, I'd like to know what my fellow council members think of, you know, if the library is going to stay the library, do they still support, or do they still view, you know, the ground floor of the library as being an area that needs to be activated and integrated into the park itself, so that it so that they work together? Because again, as Councilmember Beckman said, it's going to require probably 7-day-a-week access into that building, which Bill and Pam will tell you that costs money, and that's gonna create issues of its own. But I think the park's going to be available 7 days a week. The library, that ground floor of that library is going to need to be available 7 days a week as well.
Well, if we're not moving a city hall in, I mean, I always go back to the fact that that the library, I mean, was, supposed to be 66,000 square feet. And I do argue that libraries have changed drastically in 20 years simply because of the internet. So much of the reference material is no longer necessary in the library. And I know our library system has changed with that. A lot of people are borrowing books electronically now rather than physically. But some people don't have the electronic equipment, so we still have physical books that you could take out, which is also great. I definitely think if City Hall is not going to be in that building, we have more space than we need, and we ought to be activating that first floor, which is what Mr. Delk is working on. Do you want to chime in, Michael?
Yes, I think, we have a design being designed for drawings, permit drawings, and a gross maximum price ready to move forward with the library project as is. So what you've seen in terms of the presentation on the first floor of the library is what we're getting ready to build. If you want to alter the first floor of the library, then we need to get that direction to engineering and our design consultants immediately. So right now we're not suggesting to you any change in the library aside from your decision as to whether or not you want to move the City Hall in there. So I think if you have specific objectives for the first floor, then I think we need a consensus decision from you about that and what you're envisioning so that we can get that to our design professionals and redesign the library. Because we're pretty much, that horse has left the barn unless you make a decision on City Hall, which we can do. But I just want us to be clear about that because it'll be the third time we've sent our architects back to, work on the library. So I think that's why that's sort of an immediate concern for us. I think we need to settle that one way or the other this afternoon. And we can adjust if that's your decision.
Councilmember Bunker.
In speaking to folks in the last few weeks about moving to the library, it was my understanding that there was a floor that we could occupy the way we occupy this floor here, and that the library wouldn't be impacted. I don't want to see any negative impact to the library. And if there's not the space for us there, moving there seems to make the most sense to me if there is space for us to coexist with the library, because we can do that fairly quickly and not have to sign another lease here. So that would save us some money. And then down the road, when things are prosperous again, we could look into building a new city hall. But if the library is going to be impacted, then we probably should look for someplace else.
Well, we have the lease here, Mr. Dog.
Yes, I know the library director is concerned about the impact on the programming and operations of the library. And I want to, just remind you as my initial comments, we won't necessarily know what those are until about 4 to 6 months after a direction is given to us to look at the library as a city hall location, because we really need to design through those things. And I would also point out that it's more about the 13,000 square feet because of a lot of those ancillary support functions and infrastructure comes with this building, not just the net space that's devoted to our lease structure. So the library already contains several thousand feet of city hall in the form of the council chambers. So restroom facilities, ingress and egress. So there are impacts that we may not have considered yet in terms of the city hall library combination.
Well, I think we're moving away from that. So Ms. Beckman?
Yeah, if we're talking about if Mr. Delk wants some feedback about any potential changes to the design of that first floor to more fully activate it, you know, the way you've mentioned and Councilmember Hamilton have mentioned, I would need at least, you know, overnight to revisit. I don't have the design of that first floor in front of me. You know, when we walk into the chamber area of the library, they have the easels up with the designs, and they're not fresh in my head. But when Councilmember Hamilton mentioned like a snack bar or a coffee shop or a space for rotating art displays on that first floor to activate and engage people, is that already part of the first floor design depicted on those easels?
The design of the first floor is not an alteration really to the use or function of the library. It's a reallocation of space, prioritization of space, the stairwell and some of the reorientation of the entryways and the public areas of the art, for example, but it's not what I would consider to be, or at least what it appears that Councilman Hamilton is referring to, which is a kind of a switch or direction of use of the library space as first floor. And I'm not suggesting that that's not a good idea. Active first floor uses in downtown, urban downtowns is a good thing. All I'm suggesting is that that has not been the direction given to our design team. And if we want to make that direction, then we need to make it ideally today, so we can follow up in a timely manner with our consultant team.
And it seems like something like that wouldn't be real costly. I mean, it's just shifting some walls and things around.
I think the last point I would make on that, Councilman, is that we go back to that question is what are the operational impacts and the programming impacts on the library? So I don't think it would be as substantive. Well, I don't know how substantive that would be when you take all the library and you move it off of the first floor. So, you know, that's something that would be a factor.
So it wouldn't be, I'm sorry.
No,
so
you're fine.
Okay.
Our library director, though, is right here at the podium. So when you're done,
okay,
I'll let her chime in, then to the vice mayor.
Okay. But like right now, we had that little coffee shop snack area. We do have an art room. I don't, you know, so I wouldn't advocate moving those off the first, or, you know, doing away with a circulation desk and stuff on the first floor. I mean, I'd want it to feel like a library when you enter it and you know you're in a library, and then you just have these different ancillary, you know, features like we already have. I thought our first floor is real nice already, but.
Want to chime in on the operational challenges and changes, at least not coming to City Hall?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Yes, Jen Overmeyer, library director. We have some of the design plans from the architect, which I can address to Councilman Beckman's comments. We're just trying to, oh, there we go. So actually, we're going to move the front entrance more to the west side. Oh, actually, we're here. So we're modifying the front entrance. We're enclosing the current entrance area. This will be a gallery and for art shows and art displays. And when you walk in, this is a combination information reference desk.
We can't see them.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, get it on the screen.
Oh, okay. I'll just verbally sum it up. It will look. Yes, if you watch the broadcast, you can see it. But basically, when we're just modifying the first floor, it's still going to look like a library. We still are going to have a cafe area. It'll be a little reduced in size, but that will still exist. And we're going to have more conference rooms for collaboration. That's really the trend in libraries nationwide, is to have small groups meet and collaborate. And then we'll get our large meeting room back when, or if chamber stays here. But But to answer your question, Councilman Beckman, it will remain, it will look very much like a library, even better, more modern, lower shelves. So, any questions?
Councilmember Hamilton? You're muted.
Jen, I don't know that you can even answer this question, but again, as I'm saying, if we're looking at this first floor to be activated 7 days a week with the park, if we're going to have the books that are on the first floor still on the first floor, if we're going to have the checkout counter still on the first floor, we're going to have to man that 7 days a week. There, you know, and you know, my vision would almost be more of a take what the library operation that's on the first floor, incorporate it into the second, third, and fourth floor somehow through redistribution or whatever, so that the first floor remains active 7 days a week and available, but we can secure the second floor up where elevators don't go up to, you know, the elevators aren't functioning on the weekends. You know, you block off the stairwells during, you know, when the library's not open, but the first floor is still active. Because if it's going to be open and activated 7 days a week, and the library is going to have books on the first floor and everything else, we've got to man that with city employees and city cost 7 days a week. Whereas with the other things, the operator of the cafe, the operator of you know, the snack bar, whatever, and the other operations, the other things that are on the first floor, they're going to be they're going to have contracts with the city to operate and do what they do, and they will be responsible for manning their own things. So that's kind of the balancing act I'm looking at. And how do you, you know, how do you have that?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We're currently open 7 days a week right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see a major departure for the new design.
Okay. With just extended hours, probably because of the park.
We can consider that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Vice Mayor, you had a comment or a question?
Yeah, well, I was really looking forward to seeing some of those conceptual drawings here. So I'm disappointed that they couldn't be brought up. But I recall that there was public art. I know they're moving the entryway to more accessible from the park on the west side instead of having it on the south side. Right. And, you know, if we had a concern that we want some things open on the first floor, maybe not the library, the book part of it. I mean, you could put in things like they have in the mall, you know, just, you can open a mall up and have restaurants open, and then the book areas could have some kind of thing that comes down where you can't enter that. So I think we shouldn't, I think a 7 day a week thing is great, especially on the weekends, to have the rest of it open where people can come in and see art and, you know, have a coffee, or if we have a little snack bar or restaurant there. So that was just an idea I wanted to throw out.
Mr. Delk.
Yes, I want to, if I may, Mayor, clarify what conceptual drawings are we missing today? I'm not sure what those are. I was to the Vice Mayor. I was the question.
I believe they're the latest drawings from Williamson Dakar.
Well, okay.
I mean, you had 3-dimensional perspective drawings of what it looked like. I saw those 6 or 8 months ago.
Are we talking about the library?
Yeah, we're talking about the library.
Yeah.
Well, that project is done and decided. From our standpoint, you all have directed us to build the library. So our only question today was whether or not we need to alter that direction to incorporate a city hall. So the library, as directed, is not changing unless you direct us to change it today.
Which we need to get back on track a little bit. I think we were talking a little bit about what Councilmember Hamilton was talking about, which was maximizing the activity on the first floor.
Yeah, if we make more changes in the library project, then whatever those are, that's kind of looked at in the context of the city hall discussion. We may not move city hall there, but if we need to change directions on the first floor, that's a redesign of the project, which we can certainly do, but we want to get on it immediately. Otherwise, we have a set of plans that we're preparing to build come September 1.
Okay, well, I wasn't suggesting that we do any major changes, but we did have a conversation regarding what was there. And we have a council meeting here talking about it. It'd been nice to have some visual things to show what we have for people that are looking at this. But
well, they're seeing it on the broadcast, Vice Mayor. They just can't show it to us. They were showing those visuals on the air, but not in the Zoom.
Okay, all right.
You just don't get to see them.
Well, my apologies if we're missing an exhibit. So,
okay, Councilmember Beckman.
Well, we can always spend, tonight taking a look at those visuals and offer some comment tomorrow at the meeting if, if Mr. Delk wants a little more comment or clarification.
Which is a good point. I'd rather come back to that at another time soon, Mr. Delk, but let's get back to, I think what we've done is we've eliminated the library as a city hall site. So let's move on. Jen. I beg your pardon?
I said, you can smile now, Jen.
let's move on and hear from Ms. Clayton, and then talk a little bit more about timing and how we're willing to expend money and resources and other maybe out of the box ideas for City Hall.
Good afternoon, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. I guess the next thing that we were going to talk about was the criteria. And I think there were some comments at the last work session or at the council meeting where we presented this, that maybe there was not some agreement on the criteria that we had used to evaluate sites for new city hall. So I don't know if you'd like to go through those criteria and provide us some feedback, or Michael, what you had wanted to do at this stage.
Well, I think the ball's in the city council's court in terms of whether they want to revisit the criteria that that you utilized based on the direction of the last city council in terms of prioritization of the site selection. So I guess my first question would be if the priorities we use to rank site selection is inconsistent with the current council's desires, then how would we reprioritize?
Well,
does that have on site selection?
Yeah, Michael, I think it would be beneficial just to go through, because there's, Councilmember Bunker, Beckman, and myself that were not here when the criteria were set. I was one of the ones, the other day that questioned cost being the least important factor in the criteria. I think it would also be helpful to talk a little bit about, how a new city hall is being envisioned to fit within the downtown plan, because not everybody has a real, as much background in what the downtown plan is and how it can be incorporated. And I think what you've also heard is people are not as concerned about combining City Hall and the MSB, and they're not as concerned possibly with, an iconic building. So I think those change maybe the importance of some of the criteria. So I think it would be worthy to have that discussion quickly.
Sure. Well, I can control I've got the PowerPoint here. If I've lost the picture of the group of you, so I can't see anyone, including Gina, at the podium, but I can certainly scroll through the attachments here that are that constitute Gina's last presentation to you, and it has the prioritization, the criteria.
Sure. So the group started with looking at how City Hall might be able to implement the downtown plan, and some of the things. Michael, can you get the screens up so we can see that?
I think I have it up on my, I need the control center to,
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I did hear council talking about iconic building. One of the things that we felt was very important in choosing a location was to help us facilitate redevelopment that's envisioned by the downtown plan. And one thing that we find is very important is the prominent visibility. Whether you agree or not with the iconic architecture, we do believe that visibility is very important. And selecting a site for City Hall, obviously visibility and location. Other factors that we looked at with implementing the downtown plan, and this was really important, and Amanda may want to address this at some point, is the economic development catalyst potential of a City Hall. Having a prominent City Hall in downtown brings strength to the market, we believe. And if it is located in an area that has underutilized property or vacant properties, we believe it can be a positive force for redevelopment. So that was something that we looked at as well. Obviously, transportation access, because this is a building that's accessible by the public, locating it in an area that has good access, that's not going to cause any sort of major traffic issues with something that we looked at. And then, of course, location and proximity to other city facilities. So those were the things that we felt all made up the criteria of implementation of the downtown plan. Again, we thought that was the most important things that we should look at, and that's how we assign the most points to that criteria. The next criteria had to do with real estate considerations, primarily ownership. And if we did not own that, I don't know, Michael, if you can advance to the next slide or not, because I can only see you all and not the slides. The other things that we looked at were, if we didn't own it, was it potentially available to to acquire? We did not contact property owners, but we did have some understanding of who might be amenable to discussing the possibility of acquisition. We also thought that it was really important to look at a site to determine whether or not there was opportunities for public-private partnership, and also whether the location was eligible for CRA incentive, or if it was located in the opportunity zone. And then lastly, we were looking at whether the site was construction ready, or what would be required if we had to demolish. And we felt these considerations were the next, had carried the, the next weight, so we assigned 3 points to that. The next slide is focused on site characteristics. We felt obviously this is important. It would make construction easy, more affordable, or less affordable and challenging. We looked for parcels that had a configuration that was conducive to construction. We looked at whether or not a parcel could easily accommodate parking. Also, if there were any sort of site constraints with the topography or trees or any sort of environmental contamination. So because we have a lot of brownfields in downtown, we also wanted to make sure that the site had good infrastructure availability, and if there were opportunities for sustainability infrastructure. Was the site large enough where we could incorporate some low impact development, or was it located in a way that we could potentially incorporate solar, those kinds of things. And then the last criteria that we looked at was cost. We felt that in the order of all the other things, while this certainly is important, it's important to the citizens and to council, and finding the right site, we gave this the weight of 1 point. And we looked at whether the property would require acquisition. We looked at what kind of costs might be associated with construction, whether it would be new or construction or renovation. We considered whether there would be a lot of site preparation needed, and if we could have operational efficiencies within other city facilities. And also from the long-term perspective, would the construction, how would it impact our operating costs going forward into the future? So those were the things that we looked at. We evaluated the sites that we had selected. As I said at the presentation, we did a couple of evaluations. We looked at all the sites, we assigned points. We sort of walked away from it for a little bit, and then we went back and we reevaluated to make sure that we felt the same way and we were trying to be consistent. And when we looked at each site and each category of criteria, we looked at all the sites to make sure in that particular category we were being fair and consistent in our evaluation. And so that's really how we arrived at our ranking. And based on that exercise, we felt that the site located that we have purchased to the south of MSB was our top ranked site. And then the one, of course, across the street. So I think that covers where we are. Did you, either one of you, want to add anything? Okay.
Any questions for Gina, Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say this is a fantastic report. I mean, your site selection criteria is comprehensive, and while it's difficult to break them down into 4, 3, 2, 1 points because they're all very important, I can respect the way you've got them separated. So I appreciate that. And the report at our last city council meeting, or the one previous with the Jolly Company, was good as well. The only question I have is, under the 1 point section under cost, you have land acquisition, but we also have ownership under real estate 3 points. What's the difference between the ownership? Because that means, I'm reading it as, do we own that property or do we have to purchase it? And then you've got acquisition on the cost section. So what's that distinction?
I think we were thinking about whether or not, we owned it from a real estate standpoint, without it would be given greater weight if it was owned by the city or by the CRA. And there was overlap. I will have to say, we tried to categorize these, but there's definite overlap between all of them. So I think that cost, whether we owned it or not was important, whether there were low costs for acquisition or not. I mean, that's really what we looked at. And I should have said too that, like, we did not necessarily assign whole numbers. We did assign fractions if we felt that maybe, something partially met it or not. And I don't know if anybody else wanted to weigh in on any of that. Okay.
Gina, we looked at the sites and having the City Hall or a City Hall MSB over at the Old Times location, and potentially the PSTA depot being across the street. I mean, I go by the PSTA depot at least a minimum of twice a day. I come Garden Avenue from Chestnut, and I go back the exact same way. And I just wonder what the discussion was with staff. There is a lot of movement right there with all the buses, and a lot of them have become hybrids, so there isn't quite the odors that there used to be back 15 years ago. But I want a new city hall to be accessible. At the same time, is it a good combination to literally have the depot right next door?
I mean, I don't know how much noise was generated with the newer buses. I think they're definitely cleaner. I do think that there's a lot of synergy that can come from being located in close proximity to a bus transfer station like that. I don't know what from a noise standpoint, how that ultimately plays out with the building. I think a building can certainly be designed to minimize noise. We see that. I've seen buildings obviously built in close proximity to in Minneapolis, you know, where you can't even hear the trains that are running by, and those are trains. So, I mean, I think there's definite noise that's going to be there, but I think that a building can be constructed to deal with those noises. I don't know from an engineering perspective, you want to add anything, Tara? Okay. I mean, we live in a city. There are noises associated with the city. I think that, you know,
Well, I'm not just talking noise. I'm talking about also conflicts between pedestrians and buses, and you know, if we eventually have some other transit center there, you know, just all of it being right together, I'm questioning if you want. I mean, it's one of the reasons I almost like the old hardware store site across from the MSB a little bit better. A, because it was still in close proximity to the MSB. Crossing Myrtle isn't the greatest, but it also allowed the 2-block site on Myrtle and East and Pierce to all stay together if we ever wanted to unify that site. Then we weren't utilizing half of it. And so I'm just trying to, you know, to fully understand.
well, I think if you look at the Harvard Jolly study, they had located the city hall all on the corner piece of the property with
Right.
all the parking needed for city hall on that site. And if we had had a government center, we had located, you know, it in a parking garage. So I think that they were trying to minimize the potential conflicts by locating the building and the parking on the site. But I think Amanda wants to jump in here as well.
But there would still be people going from the city hall over to the MSB and over to PD, and you get conflicts with all. I mean, I've seen many people almost get hit over on Garden because they're darting between buses to go across to Emily's or, you know, that convenience store that's right there. I'm just asking, if we're designing from the ground up, is that really the way you would want to do it? And how many people are using a PSTA bus to get to City Hall?
Well, I don't know what the ridership is for that. I think one of the things that may contribute to people, you know, not necessarily paying attention to the traffic is the location. It's in a very low, you know, traffic area. And so people have a tendency, I think, to be a little more casual when they're crossing the street and accessing the transit station. I think if you're a more visible, active area, the likelihood of people acting that way would be reduced somewhat. But you wanna,
yeah, I just wanted to give a kind of a land use redevelopment perspective. So I think the beauty of combining this site, you know, when we're thinking 20, 30 years in advance, right now, maybe a lot of people aren't riding the bus, but it's our job. I believe what our plans have said and, you know, state and local policies through Ford Pinellas is we want to support cycling, walking, you know, rail, bus. And one way you do that, if you have a civic presence there, like a city hall or other, you know, the police department, municipal services, you have safety, right? You can have information set up for public information, more guidance. So that pairing of the city hall and the transit can be very powerful because you have some built-in programmings and you have a greater perception of safety with those services around. Also, if you think about it, because right now the Collier's report showed that bus transportation by the private market is considered less desirable than train at this point. So for us, if we say, hey, we're going to take the chance as, you know, a civic user to do a partnership and redevelop on that land, that's more likely to happen in the near term than saying get a public-private partnership with a completely private entity that wants to co-locate with a bus station. So I think there's an advantage that way, although there's certainly examples all over the US of, you know, private businesses and public transit coming together. And from a safety standpoint for traffic engineering, right now there's barely any kind of engineering, right, and safety design in our current conditions. So by designing from the ground up, I think we have an awesome chance of making it very safe, very visible, so you don't have people wandering around and almost getting hit by buses.
Councilmember Beckman,
Yeah, am I unmuted?
you are.
Okay, good. So I'm looking at, on this laptop I'm looking at the Harvard Jolly architecture depictions. So we're not talking about the depiction, it's called B2 at the corner of Myrtle and Court. You're talking about which one right now across on Garden? Which one was that? That's,
I think the
is it?
mayor is talking about the existing PSTA facility, correct, Mayor?
I'm talking about how the interaction is currently with pedestrians in the current PSTA site.
Right.
I'm talking about if the city hall were at Court and Myrtle,
Yeah. Yep.
and then PSTA was to the direct north. So it would divide the MSB from the new city hall,
Okay.
and just all of the interactions that would occur due to the vehicular traffic that's created by a new city hall, the MSB, CPD, and PSTA.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm
think-
wondering if you are creating potentially an issue.
I think another good reason for this site too is it located adjacent to Pinellas Trail, and we saw that as an advantage for pedestrians, also as having a safe place for movement in that general area. I mean, I don't disagree that there needs to be careful analysis of, how everything is oriented. A traffic study is going to be important. But at this point, we were just looking at site selection, and we believe that there's a viable way to build a city hall. It's in a good location. It's next to a Pinellas Trail, which provides a protection. And that's, I think, a reason why we found it very attractive.
I see you, Councilmember Hamilton. Do you have something to add on that, Councilmember Beckman, before I go to the?
Yeah, thank you. So as we look at this, as I'm looking at the depiction of the government center, the city hall on the corner of Myrtle and Court, are you telling me that if we don't, well, the way it's depicted here, we would, we have parking then that is to the north, and that north vacant lot next to the municipal services building, which is where we feed the homeless, right? Right now?
We have several different options for that laid out. The first option, which is option 1B1 in their report, has the city hall located there on the corner parcel with some on-site parking and then some on-street parking.
Yep.
And then another option has, well, that was with the combined government center, but you can see the parking is split as well as a private redevelopment opportunity.
Right.
And there is an option that shows all of City Hall and all on the transit site. On the corner site with the garage, and then having that property in between the corner and MSB as a potential bus transfer station.
Okay, I don't see the one where it's a potential of bus transfer
It says
station.
PSTA use. It's
Okay. Okay. All right. And who has control over that? Is that us who has control over whether or not that even goes there, if that's the mayor's concern?
But we own it.
Right. But we could say we want a bus terminal somewhere else.
We could, but there are not many sites that have been identified downtown.
Mm-hmm.
The current site is undersized.
Mm-hmm.
There was always talk of potentially using the county parking lot to the west of the current site. I know there's heartburn about that. Peace Memorial uses that. I don't think the county's ready to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the vice mayor has some ideas on that site. And so back when we originally bought it, when we bought the St. Pete Times site and had the other vacant lot, it was always envisioned that if light rail came to Pinellas County, there was a very good chance that St. Pete and Clearwater would be connected utilizing the CSX right away.
Yes.
Because it was very low hanging fruit. And then the question was, Would you follow it all the way to St. Peter? Would there be a jog down in Pinellas Park that would throw the line more on the 275 corridor and then right into downtown? But that was always the envisioned site. And so it was talked about to have a multimodal site where you would have the trail, a parking garage, and the PSTA / railway depot, all consolidated into one. And then when Greenlight got defeated, that pretty much put that to bed for the time being until there's another referendum and maybe people's minds change.
So it looks like we're looking at B4.1. I can see your PSTA future use. We've got the parking garage, and you're calling it a government center. Is that kind of what we're looking at, Ms. Clayton?
That was the design that included the government center, a combined.
So we just lower the number of stories or something?
You would, yes, for a city hall. One thing that they did not study was just a new city hall with a transit facility. So if you look at option 1, that option made that available for future development, and it accommodated some additional parking through on-street parking. So that would be an issue if there was the PS
transit thing,
transfer station, right?
Okay.
Councilmember Hamilton? You're muted.
This is probably going to come across as me being very closed-minded, but given everything we're talking about, to me, we're down to two options. Because number one, I have no interest in having to acquire and purchase land to build our city hall. Because when the city becomes the buyer, the price goes up. And it's not something I'm interested in doing. That being said, I think while it may not, it can be designed to be very aesthetically pleasing. I think the corner of Court and Myrtle is a better location for a bus for a bus depot and a transportation depot, given if in the future, I don't know if I'll still be alive, but if we ever go to an elevated light rail or anything of that nature in the future, that's a much more accessible location for a transportation product. So to me, we're down to the two locations that remain in my mind are the lot directly south of the MSB across Pierce Street for City Hall, right there. And you've got the City Hall, you've got MSB, you've got the police station, all in one place. And if staff needs to go from one building to the other, crossing Pierce is nowhere near as dangerous as crossing Myrtle. But the other location, which to give consideration to, is, we all talk about needing more parking in downtown for when we do Imagine Clearwater, and when we, just to give the businesses in downtown more parking. Well, if we're going to work with PSTA and get PSTA moved off of their current location, that location now becomes the prime location for parking. A parking garage there, you can build it as big or as small as you want it. You can build it where it's very flexible for future use, so that, if in the future we have less and less need for parking, you can convert certain levels of that parking garage into other uses and whatnot. But you can build that to whatever size you want to initially and put City Hall on top of that parking garage. But that parking garage, that location, you're a 2-block walk from everything in the core of downtown. And 2 blocks is not too far to ask people to walk. I mean, Clearwater, we like being 20 feet from our front door, but when you travel, when we go to Philadelphia, we go to, and all of us travel to other cities, you walk 2 blocks without even giving it a thought. So I just think, that's my two locations is the present bus depot or the lot directly south of the MSB building right now. Those are the two locations that make the most sense to me.
Vice Mayor?
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and segue into my idea that I've kind of been thinking of for probably 15 years. This goes all the way back to when I was on DDB. And we really had a need for parking on the 500 block. I think that we can accomplish everything that we're going to be talking about. City Hall, parking, the land acquisition and I'm talking about the Fort Harrison Park Garden Pierce block, which is the PSTA in the county lot. It abuts Fort Harrison. It's a great location. It's center mass downtown for us. We know we're going to have to put a parking garage for Imagine Clearwater. And so about a year ago, I guess, I put together a little conceptual of this because I know that we can swap lands with PSTA, move them over to Court Street and Myrtle. I know that the county, we can probably get their surface parking by giving them some space in a parking garage that they only use during the week. At night, we could use it for events that are happening at Magic Clearwater. And really the City Hall selection criteria that I've looked at almost checks every box on here. So if I could ask Joelle, now I've got a conceptual that I put together in about 10 minutes. So don't look at the design and think, I'm not an architect, okay? But this is just a conceptual idea of what we could do on that block that would give us, think of this, the first floor could be mixed use, restaurant, retail. We could set back off of Fort Harrison 50 feet for a public plaza with maybe a fountain and some architecture with seating there, very comfortable. 6 floors of parking, and then on the top put City Hall. Be a great structure, cementing our position in downtown Clearwater. So I gave Joelle a conceptual of this that I put together. If she can put it up on the screen, just to give you an idea kind of what it looks like. Don't look at the architecture on it.
So Joelle, will this be something that both the council and the public can see, or?
He was referencing it.
Yeah, the public can see it now.
Oh, okay.
I can't see it.
You'd have to look on your
Email.
on your iPad if you've got it with you.
So basically what I did is I took on my laptop, I took a view of that block on Google, and I took a building, I think out of Tampa, I can't even remember where it was, and I positioned it to fit on that block and just put it on there. Now that I'm just saying it, not the architecture, but we could have mixed use first floor, public plaza on the front. We could have all the parking we need for downtown, Imagine Clearwater. The county could use it, the church could use it, and then whatever we need for City Hall on top of that. And I know that one of the plans going back with when we were talking about maybe doing a joint facility with the county, they were thinking about using this block to do that. And the city and the county would share a facility over a parking garage. In fact, I think it was there was two different plans over a period of maybe 10 years. But the last one last year for the new council members, I know that Mayor Hibbert was probably involved in the first plan.
That was in 2008 with the Equus group.
And that didn't happen. And then the one that we just looked at a year or so ago didn't happen because we couldn't come up with a, what's that? I've got it. Yeah. So that didn't happen. I guess we couldn't come to terms on the amount of space that we all needed, and so that kind of went away. The first plan actually had the PSTA bus station incorporated into the parking garage. And, you know, this whole thing about the intermodal center on Court Street, I mean, I've been thinking about it for over 10 years. Maybe we don't have rail right now, but PSTA does have a conceptual plan, and I know it's in with staff right now trying to make it conform to our new downtown development code. But I see mixed use there as well. And, you know, we got to be thinking about the future on this. There is going to be a bus, as soon as they get the West Shore interchange completed, we will have a bus service that goes from Tampa to Clearwater, specifically from the airport to Clearwater, which we haven't ever had a successful bus route. And so we will be able to get people from Tampa over here. And we need a facility that can, I don't want to have to go back to the drawing board in 8 years when that happens and have to redo something. So I think we ought to be thinking about that future now.
Is Ms. Clayton still in the chambers? I think we are narrowing the field here, but I do want to ask about 2 other sites that, you know, weren't in the materials that I saw. You know, this occurred back before we got back on, but was the old fire station site eliminated because of size, or because that was going to be converted to workforce housing?
Well, I think that, yes, that was off the table at the time that we started this study. We had issued, I think, an RFP for the redevelopment of that site, and I think it had been awarded by, yeah, it's also under an acre in size. So it was not large enough, we didn't think.
So because of the size too.
I think you're right.
What was the minimum size that the architects felt were required, even if you go vertical?
Well, I don't think we directly asked the architects that question. What we used was a number, I think, that we got from Equus, which was around, or from Williamson Dakar, which was around 2 acres, but we looked at sites that were less than 2 acres, a little under that. I think one of the smallest sites we looked at was, well, we did look at one that was turned out to be very small. It was a little over an acre. Yeah, Drew and Laura. And then iDatex was like a little over 1.5 acres. So we tried to get in that 2 acre range. That was what we were shooting for.
Was the old CMA site ever considered?
No, it was not, because that we
was a redevelopment site.
It's part of Imagine Clearwater's vision, so we did not want to do anything that was counter to the recommendations that were in Imagine Clearwater.
I just wondered if there was a public-private partnership where there was more uses that were on top and the public uses were on the bottom, if that was a site that had any potential.
Again, that was not consistent with Imagine Clearwater, so we didn't consider it.
Okay, fair enough. Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, can you tell me why there wasn't a ranking or, so it's my understanding that Councilmember Hamilton is suggesting the site just south, immediately south of the Municipal Services Building, right across from Pierce Street, but that one has not been, we don't have any drawings of a potential full City Hall site there. Why not? Is it not big enough?
What we did is that we looked at, that site is combined with the one at the corner.
Right.
So we focused on the location of City Hall at the corner because we felt that that was more of a visible, prominent location. And because we know that PSTA was also interested in the site, we felt that a bus transfer station at the entry of the downtown core was not the best entry point into the downtown core. And so we really thought that City Hall was a better focus for that corner. And so their design really focused on locating City Hall there.
Okay, so it seemed, I can understand that it would look nicer to have City Hall at the corner of Court and Myrtle as far as what you're looking at as you drive into our, you know, downtown area and heading towards the beach. But it seems to me that maybe with functionality, if I'm driving big buses and shuttling people in and out, especially if we're coming from the airport into downtown or the beach, that it might be easier for buses to navigate at that corner of Court and Myrtle. I mean, was that kind of...
The drawings I believe that we have from PSTA actually show PSTA also located on that parcel that's in between MSB and the corner. Their original design showed a parking garage located on the corner and the actual functioning bus transfer station to the north.
Okay. Oh, so they're okay with that being jutting in a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think they've been looking at a variety of conceptual designs, but the last ones that we saw had put a parking garage on the corner and moved the buses, you know, a little farther north.
And I want to,
Vice Mayor.
if I could just elaborate on that, it's not just going to be a bus station. It's going to be a multimodal center. It's going to be a mixed use. There may be some restaurant kind of things on there. So it's not going to just be the same kind of look as they have now that's, you know, downtown.
I think the main things that they showed us incorporated a parking garage. Of course, they were willing to talk about, you know, the possible mixed use of the site. And it seemed like the last time we, at least planning and development, interacted with them, they were a little unclear on a few things like the number of parking spaces that they would need. They also weren't quite clear on their need for office space, you know, so there's still a lot of issues to work out if we had a partnership with them. But I did want to give Tara an opportunity to address the traffic.
Hi, Tara.
And then Mr. Horn. Or should we give Mr. Horn first? I think from a ranking standpoint, let's go to Mr. Horn. You can stay there.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say, to be perfectly clear, I don't think the city and PSTA were completely on the same page on that space between Myrtle and where the MSB is. We were going to have to negotiate out how we were going to be compatible there. But because of where we were at the time, there were so many unknowns. We weren't really forced to kind of nail some of that down. I know our staff felt very strongly about, you know, how we wanted people to encounter the downtown coming into it. I also know how strong the PSTA, you know, obviously was looking at the efficiency of being on the corner. And so I think two different perspectives needed to come together to figure out how do we optimize, you know, how that's going to work. And then to the Vice Mayor's point, clearly PSTA started gravitating toward the reality that their design had to be more than just another transfer station. It had to be more appealing for all kinds of reasons, but just recognizing transfer stations these days, you know, need to be viewed in an urban context much more than just where a bus, well, just like the current transfer station. Nobody really likes the current transfer station. You know, there's nothing attractive about that. And so no one envisioned that we were going to just simply have another version of that. And so my own personal view is I think where we cite City Hall was going to ultimately drive how this was going to come together. And so to Councilmember Hamilton's point and the Vice Mayor's point, you know, those two alternatives really kind of highlight what I think our options are. And since I have the microphone, I'll just say that the county has always told us that if we wanted to use the county parking lot or have access to it or use it, we would have to purchase it because it's a utility fund ownership. But we always thought that if we did that, that would be the only land cost that we would have there. If we swap PSTA to the corner and swap their land, we wouldn't have that PSTA part of that cost. So anyway, Mayor, thanks.
I mean, one of the issues that concerns me is, we went out and bought the Times property years ago because at the time we did think it was going to eventually be transit.
Correct.
And the PSTA did not have the money to do so. And, at some point, and take this in the spirit it's meant, Vice Mayor, and you can take this message back as far as I'm concerned, they're going to need to step up to the plate because I don't think we should land bank that property forever. They need to go out and either find the money internally through the county or through the Fed so that something can move forward. But to just keep it as a placeholder decade after decade is, I'm starting to get maybe a little bit tired. So,
if I could respond to that.
Yes.
The past 3 years, the PSTA did win the grant for the planning, for the plans, and they put that to use. Past couple of years, they've gone at it every year to the Fed and this year's no different. The city actually wrote a letter of support, didn't say where because we didn't know, but that we would be in back of it. I'm taking an active role in this because I'm on the PSTA planning committee as well. I've already talked to Amplify and a lot of businesses in Clearwater. If we want PSTA to be successful, and I know I sit in 2 chairs here. I'm council today, but I'm also on the PSTA board. We need to have a very solid backing from our community. And I've already started asking for letters to be written. So we have and I'd like a letter from council saying we do want this for another application the end of this year to go into PSTA. So when they submit their grant form, that we have the backing of our community and back of it. And I think we will be successful and they will get grant money and this will become a reality.
Okay. Kira, she left. I think she gave up on me.
Tara, come back, Tara. There she is. You muted, Tara. Unmute Tara. There you go.
Sorry about that. Tara Kivett, city engineer. I was just going to touch on a little bit of during the evaluation of the sites that we actually thought, given the speeds and the one-way traffic on Court Street, that would also create some challenges for PSTA, in addition to what Gina talked about as the civic prominence and entrance into the city of Clearwater. So our preference was to put them up on the north half of that parcel. Then they've got 2-way direction on Myrtle. They've got more flexibility to come in and out safely. Thanks.
Okay, well, I want to make sure we're moving the ball here. Yeah, I think we've talked about the visibility, accessibility, and architecture. I don't think we're necessarily saying this has to be a standalone structure, because I've heard several comments about, multi-use, if at all possible. Is that a reasonable statement by everybody? Okay. And then I guess the last question that staff's asking is, what are our expectations about a timetable? And, at the outset, Michael said, obviously, and Pam can chime in on this, we have a lease here. We do have an option for an extension, Pam?
Yes, sir, we do. We have 5-year extension available.
I mean, right now, if we do a standalone city hall, we have not designated enough money, I don't think, at Penny. Would you agree with that, Bill?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're correct.
I mean, I don't think that's going to
Yeah.
cover the nut.
6 million ain't gonna do it.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about 22, 23 over at the sites the other day, just for a city hall, up to 65 for a combined. So, I mean, we need to set a timetable that everybody's happy with. We also need to find funding. And as long as we've waited for a new city hall, I want to make sure we have the right site and build the right structure. I mean, I personally prefer, you know, the vice mayor's site over on Fort Harrison with the county and the PSTA site, and leave the 2 lots over on Myrtle for PSTA and transit along the trail and the rail line and everything else. I'd rather pursue that, somehow deal with the county on the fact that it's owned, you know, by the utility, but that's my preferred site. Hoyt?
I can agree with what you just said. Like I said, it'd be great to have it, in my eye, you know, if we could build it directly south of the MSB and there's still enough room for proper ingress and egress and access for a transportation location at the corner of Court and Myrtle, that'd be great. But even, you know, I could be very happy and very comfortable building a city hall on top of a parking garage on that location where the PSTA is right now. However, we're back to PSTA and we got to get PSTA moved. But if we tell PSTA, you're going to get all of this, I guess my question becomes, if we're going to give them 2 blocks for PSTA to work on for transportation and intermodal and future transportation needs, maybe PSTA ought to come forward on our behalf with the money necessary that the county wants for their property. Because
that's kind of how I thought about
that's
it.
That's an awful lot of dirt we're trading for the size dirt we're getting, and they're the ones that are getting the great benefit out of that. Maybe they ought to help us find the money to pay the county. You know, it's all, you know, money, you know, going back and forth among governmental entities, but you know, I think PSTA ought to step up and help us purchase the county spaces.
Well, I think you're hearing somewhat of a message, Vice Mayor, to bring back to PSTA.
Well, absolutely.
Some impatience from the city and also the desire to start to really move ahead.
Well, I will bring that back to them immediately.
Mr. Horn?
I was just going to say the county parking lot, PSTA transfer station did enjoy originally, you know, a fair amount of support from the previous council, but because of the conflict with not necessarily supporting an iconic city hall in another location, you know, kept the council from really coming to closure on that. So you all are kind of going back to something that has always been attractive. And the other reason it was attractive is because we have always talked about, Mayor, previously, is having a garage there anyway. So the question was going to be whether it was going to have a city hall on top of it. But
Right.
We need to have a 600, 700 space garage in that location to address, imagine, Clearwater parking needs, as well as the commercial parking needs in the downtown. So we were going to, our thinking, at least from the administration perspective, and talking to council, was we were going to build a garage in that location anyhow. So the question was going to be what was going to be paired with.
Councilmember Bunker and then Beckman.
Just an observation. I'm starting to understand now why that list of history was so long. I thought we had it boiled down to sites A, B, and C, or maybe the library, and we'd make a decision today. And no, there's more work to be done.
You now get to be a part of that history. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, it also does go back even further than that chronology that we've been given. It goes all the way back to, the city at one point, many back in the 90s. I think it was the early 90s. The city of Clearwater purchased the Sun Bank building, which is the glass building across the street from the 600 building. The city bought that, and it was going to become the new city hall in the early
MSB.
90s.
And MSP.
And the MSP. All city activity, all city was going to be in there. But we had a city election. Some people got elected who didn't like that plan, and at their first meeting as a city commission, just submarine that project and sold and canceled the purchase of that property. So that's so it goes.
Which I think they bought
further.
for $8.5 million and then proceeded to build an $11.5 million MSP.
Exactly.
That's undersized.
So
Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, going back to the beginning of our meeting today. So it seems like if we've decided that City Hall won't be combined with the library, then we will be extending this lease here in the 600 building, correct? Because there's no way we're making any significant movement with PSTA or anyone else to have a completed City Hall within 3 years or whatever we have left here, correct?
I'm not sure I would totally agree with that, because if we can get the land swap done, and that, I would think PSTA could operate temporarily in a, just some pavement on those empty lots right now with temporary buildings to operate while they build their structure. I think they could adjust and make it work where we could move forward on that site with our parking garage and a city hall. Now, whether or not we can get all that done in 3 years, 2-3 years is questionable, but
PSTA is, they need to move because they're going to all electric buses. I don't know if you know that, but the hybrid buses are a thing of the past. We've got 2 electric, we're buying in manufacture right now, 4 more all electric buses with charging loops. And because of the battery location on the roof, they can't even get under that existing transfer station roof. So I know that that's a big thing on their planning, is to get out of there and get this moving forward. We had to make our decision first. The other thing that dragged this out was a year or so ago, having the county and the city, everything was at a standstill then until we decided if we were going to do a combination county city thing. So now that that's been put to bed, I think everything can really start moving.
Ms. Aiken.
We have to give 9 months notice of our intent to renew on the 5-year lease. So we have a good bit of time before that would be required to be exercised. A little less than 3 years.
Councilmember Hamilton.
I know this is a work session, so we're not taking any vote, but do we have any type of a consensus on the comfort level of this council putting a new city hall on top of a parking garage on what is presently the PSTA bus terminal site? I'm comfortable with
that would be my preferred site. I don't want to be right next to the PSTA site. I think there's still conflicts. I'm sorry. I think I travel it more than all of you, and I just don't want to be right next to it. And I certainly wouldn't want it between the MSB and City Hall. So I would prefer to solve the parking issue that we still have in downtown combined with a City Hall. And I would like to leave in the mix the potential for a partnership on the private side to either put some more. We do not have, honest to goodness, Class A space in downtown anymore for office. And I think we also ought to always be looking at adding roofs. So if you could either do residential or commercial on top of a city hall with adequate parking, I like the county/PSTA site better than the rest. Councilmember Beckman.
Can I ask Ms. Clayton's opinion about that location? And what she thinks about that?
City Hall's muted. Or whatever it is over there.
Yeah, we got it. We did, that site was included in the rankings, Councilwoman Beckman, and it ranked number 4. It received a total of 5 out of 10 points, whereas the Myrtle Avenue site received 9.25, and then the Myrtle Avenue East at 7.25. Some of the concerns that we had with it is that it's surrounded by institutional uses on all, so that intersection would have all institutional uses, the Church of Scientology on 2 sides, Peace Memorial on the other, and City Hall. And we felt that that would really create a dead zone in downtown. So that's why it did not rank high on the implementation of downtown plan and location criteria. It did also rank, not as high on the cost because it would involve some construction. Site characteristics, we thought it was, probably a good parcel configuration. We didn't know of any sort of adverse site conditions with it. And we know there could potentially be a willing seller, but we thought that it was a little complicated because there were 2 owners involved, PSTA and the county. It would require some demolition and relocate. So just logistically, it seemed to be very involved. So that's why we didn't rank it higher in the real estate. We gave it 1.25 there, 2 points on the downtown plan implementation, 1 point on site characteristics, and 0.75. That's how we arrived at 5 points.
Does that answer your question?
It does, but I'm wondering if there are, are there creative ways we could get people to know that that would be the city hall there? I mean, it is kind of hidden behind all that stuff. You don't know that it's there until you take some steps up. I think it's Pierce Street.
I think we were looking at combining where PST is located also with the county parking lot. So it would have frontage on Fort Harris.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right. So
that's the parking lot that's being discussed to the west of the PSTA depot.
Right. So while we thought that the site was somewhat visible because it's on Fort Harrison, we just didn't think it was, as prominent as, say, the Fort and Myrtle.
Myrtle, yeah.
And
okay.
Also the other consideration why it ranked lower on implementation of the plan is that there's not really vacant property around that area. And we were looking at City Hall being a catalyst for other redevelopment in the immediate vicinity, and that this is just a conglomeration really of institutional uses around an intersection.
Okay.
Mr. Horn?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Councilmember Hamilton?
Well, to answer Councilmember Beckman's question, I also think if we ultimately say yes and we do this, I think you've got about a 2-year construction time frame to educate the citizens of Clearwater that this is going to be our new city hall. So I think you've got plenty of time to get that message out.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, and we just talked about Imagine Clearwater being a 30-month project with our construction advisor saying he could probably pull it in less than that. So if we're talking about completing Imagine Clearwater, we're going to be talking real soon about where we're putting parking because we're going to need that aspect of it. So I think that this could happen if we make the decision to move forward. We can make it before we have to really re-up another 5 years.
And
Councilmember Beckman.
And funding for it and an approximate cost. So it's certainly not going to be in the 60s when we combine municipal services and City Hall, as you said, correct? there's no land acquisition. There shouldn't be big land acquisition costs if we're doing some kind of swap. So
And
does
the
anybody
parking-
have,
Well, the parking fund has money to help pay for the parking garage aspect of the thing. So our expense is the actual building on top.
okay,
So,
And that's why if you had a public-private partnership where there was either commercial or residential that sits on top of that, that doesn't have land cost, you might be able to also help offset some of your costs. Now, as you go higher, there's also some additional construction costs because it has to be able to support a taller building. And then if you get real high, then you've got sprinkling, all sorts of stuff. But there's potential there.
and how much money do we have in the parking fund right now? And it's earmarked for this kind of thing?
I think I should say, I thought I saw 14 million. Is it more than that in reserves?
I believe it's around 11. I'm trying to pull it up now.
When I was going through the budget, which I don't have in front of me.
10.5 million.
10.5? Okay. Tara, do you have something to add?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I was going to say we had about 10, I think, in the parking fund set aside for this garage. But the cost for what we're talking about now, going vertical so much, will be slightly higher than your standard dollar per square foot that Harvard Jolly used for 2-story buildings. So just to let you know, if it was just a 2-story city hall and then a separate garage, we're looking at maybe 40 million. But now that you're all stacking everything, it would just be a guess, but it would be more than 40. So that's all.
And that's why we never build a city hall.
We'll be in high-rise construction.
I think we need to get more definitive about what that cost really is. I just hate to see us speculate.
I understand. And
yeah,
I think we've gone far enough today to allow staff to have narrowed the choices. And also there's information now you really kind of need to go back to the drawing board and get. Mr. Delk?
Yes, Mayor. I'm kind of hearing you come together around 2. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. And 1, thank you. That's a lot of great discussion today.
yes.
Are we taking a look at maybe the area just to the south of the MSB as one option, but the preferred option being PSTA Fort Harrison site?
I think that is the preferred site.
Okay, the Fort Harrison PSTA site.
Yes.
Yes.
Would your direction today to be to really turn our attention exclusively to the PSTA Fort Harrison site and try to pull together a package of information for you that will give you a comfort level to really provide that specific direction to proceed forward, or take a look at a second option? Would that be how you would have us proceed?
I think it's definitely, what I'm hearing is it's the primary. I never think it's a terrible idea to have a fallback position. I think it would be foolish not to, because you just don't know what will happen with getting the county parking lot. And I still have questions with PSTA actually moving. And so if we put all of our eggs in a basket on a parcel of property that we do not have control of, I think that's a little bit short-sighted.
Yeah. Well, I want to be, just to have a sense of what, if my understanding is correct, if we had to have a fallback position, have I heard correctly that fallback position might be the property immediately to the south of the MSB? Would that be true?
I know Councilmember Hamilton prefers that. I do. Councilmember Bunker, Beckman.
Yeah.
I think there's operational questions
Yes.
from PSTA that need to be answered. I understand you know, if the entrance onto the Court Myrtle site is from Court, you are, unless you have some decel lanes specifically for buses, I can see where that could create conflicts on Court Street. Or they make the right turn onto Myrtle and either enter from Franklin. You know, there's just a bunch of different moving parts, and I don't have the expertise to make that determination. I think we ought to talk to the people that deal with it on a daily basis. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, the original plan, the concept I saw with the combination 2 lots and taking Pierce out of it, they were going to combine them. They were actually going to go in off of East. They were turning off the East and then would go into the station that way, and then they'd leave off of, I think, Myrtle. So it wouldn't be a direct in and out off of Court, but.
Right, and
I
that
mean,
goes back though to, you know, when we were still talking about light rail on the
Rail.
CSX line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll,
Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, for Mr. Delk, are we providing any kind of feedback on the first floor of the library, or are we all good with how the designers have it designed and we're done with that?
Councilmember Beckman, I was going to come back to that before we leave. We're not advocating any change in the library plans that you all have already approved. But if, as part of our takeaway from this City Hall discussion today, you collectively want a redesign to the first floor of the library, then I do want to come away with that direction today or tomorrow night if the decision needs to be made then.
I'd rather do it tomorrow night once everybody has, I mean, the plans have been sent to us. Jim sent them to us, but I would rather discuss that tomorrow night.
Fair enough.
Okay. And then when the shovels start with the library, does that mean that how is that access to the serving council chambers right now going to go? What's happening with that?
We're having discussions among staff with that. I think clearly the folks, the contractors who would be building the library would prefer us to vacate it. There are some technical logistical problems that are pretty pronounced with moving out of the library, given the technology that we use in the council chambers. So I think we're going to try to talk to them and see if there's a workaround to maintain the council chambers and the technology that we have there to conduct our meetings before we have to decide to try to move that. That task is rather disconcerting to our public communications and the folks who support our public meetings. So we're going to try to sort that out over the next short period of time for you.
Other comments or questions? Okay, well, I want to thank the staff today. I want to thank the council for a really good conversation. I appreciate everybody's frank opinions. And we will, if I could ask everybody to look further, more closely at the plans for the library. And if there's anything you want to discuss tomorrow night, we can do that under council discussion items. Okay, Mr. Horn.
Well, I was going to say, I was going to put the continuation under city manager
verbal reports
and have all the requisite staff available to get us through the end of it.
Okay, very good. Anything else for the good of the order?
Just thanks for me. Great meeting today.
All right, thank you all. We are adjourned.